like to boogie. We're going to go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay? I need to be louder. Should I slide this in? Everything's good? Okay. Well, if you can't hear me, let me know. You can't hear me? How about now? Is that better? All right. I'll be close to the microphone. Okay. So As you know, we have 3 scheduled meetings right now. This is the first of the 3. And the primary purpose of this meeting is for us to touch base with one another, because it's been a while since we had a working session. And during that time, there's been a lot of public input at our council meetings via emails and otherwise. And so council members have had thoughts on things that they may not have been thinking about the last time we had a working session. So this is an opportunity for council members to let one another know things that they're thinking about prior to the work session on the 27th, where we'll actually be voting on things that we would like to include or exclude from the zoning code. I asked council members to send me thoughts that they would like to be included tonight to let their other members know about. And so the purpose of this is for us to know what each other are thinking, but also to do it in a public forum so that the public is aware of some of the things that people have been thinking about. So with that being said, uh, we are just going to start at number 1 and we will go down. And if anyone has anything that they would like to add in the sense of a little explanation or rationale behind this item being included on the list, um, this is an opportunity for people to do that. Um, so we'll start with number 1. And these ideas, a number of them have been advanced by more than one council member. So I didn't bother to put names next to anything. Some of these 3 or 4 council members expressed an interest in. So I'm just going to go through them. And if anyone would like to speak up and explain a rationale for why they feel this should be on the list, we can do that. And once we've exhausted number 1, we'll go to number 2, et cetera, until we get to the end of the list.
President,
Yes.
I'd like to say. Thank you. This relates to number 1, but it also relates in general. And I was trying to figure out when to bring this up, and I figure this is as good a time as any, maybe optimum, and that is, I want to express my gratitude to all those that have been engaged with the community and with council. It's been a good lesson in democracy and how it's supposed to work. I want to call out a few people and thank them, David and Rose Drain, for their leadership, and then also there's so many others, Emily Dunapace, Joyce Kepke, et cetera. I mean, lots of people that have stepped up. And what's impressive to me, and I've been at this a while, what's impressive to me is that not only was there concern, which is very important initial component, but then with the concern, there was organization. It's not like thought, oh, this is not a good direction, or we want to have our say. It went beyond the concern to organizing, to petitions, and then this is rarefied air, where a really good group of citizens have advanced a solution. So this is a great example, and it shows concern and organization and leadership. And I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time and and being engaged and in such a thorough fashion. I think to an extent, what you're seeing here tonight is a result of your efforts. So I just wanted to preface it all by thanking all of those that have devoted their time, and thanks for the time.
Okay, number one, consider adoption of the citizen proposed central residential district as a replacement for the pedestrian residential district. Uh, Would you like to go first, Bill? Okay.
Sure, I'll speak on it. So I introduced this consideration adopting the citizen-led proposal. Much like Bill said, I think it's extremely important that we have the consideration of our community and that they have a continued say in this process. So that's why I'm so excited that we're doing something like this today, and we're going to be continuing to do this. The current PR district, it just doesn't make too much sense to me in the way that it's currently written. I totally understand the need for expanding affordable housing, but I think the zoning code already does this. We have 2-unit dwellings available in R2 and UR zones and multi-unit dwellings in the central business and the new gateway district. And I also completely understand the need for having barbershops, daycare centers, food pantries, retails in walkable neighborhoods. But again, this zoning code addresses this by having these commercial zones. And I completely understand that there's been new modifications made to the proposed PR district. I'm excited to hear about those, for everyone to hear about those, for us to work together and really come up with a zoning code that this entire city and council can be proud of, because there's been a lot of work into this. And I know that there's been some confusion and some concern, and I think that's right. But I think overall, this is an extremely important step for our city. This is an extremely important zoning code, and I'm just really excited to implement these changes in the city and have something that we're all proud of that's going to really help Bowling Green continue on its fantastic path. So,
Would you like to go now?
Yeah.
Okay.
In thanking the many citizens that have been involved with this, I also want to thank Mark for his leadership in ushering us through this unusual procedure. And also, I don't know how many of you know the extent of the effort that Rachel Phipps and Jeff Dennis have put into this. They've gone above and beyond in showing what a council person should do in balancing what their vision is with the needs and the concerns of the citizens. So I wanted to call out Mark and Rachel and Jeff for what they're doing. And as far as what we're doing tonight, item 1, consider adoption of the citizen proposed central residential district as a replacement for the pedestrian residential district. I think involved with number 1 and what we're trying to do, according to Council President Mark, is we're trying to come up with basically a list of things that we are going to concentrate on. And so this number 1, I'm supporting that. But as part of that, we may end up having a decision where we keep some sort of mixed use, be it a revision of pedestrian residential, or we approach it from a different angle by taking some commercial and putting some residential components. I think having in our zoning code something that allows for the equivalent of pedestrian residential, not where it's currently proposed, but having it there in case in the future there might be some area that it would fit. So in terms of item number 1, take the proposed central residential, or take a modification of the proposed central residential and either scrap or revise and put on the shelf pedestrian residential. I think that's all under item 1, and that's all that those are the various nuances and flavors that I think we may have discussion on in our forum. So is that the kind of thing you're looking for, Mark? Is
Right.
feedback on that?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's good.
thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything to number one. Okay,
Mr. President.
yep, go ahead.
A few introductory remarks too, that overall, I think the zoning code revision is on the road to accomplishing its established goals. I really do. It will be clear, easier to read, easier to understand, eliminate redundancies and contradictions, and provides a clear standard for all readers, whether they're citizens or businesses or developers wanting to invest in BG. However, I think our biggest responsibility here in revising this zoning code is to set the stage for the future. What do we want BG to look like in 10, 20, 50 years? And for example, as we consider the issues surrounding the proposed PR district, we should first agree to a vision for the neighborhoods within the district, the neighborhoods that surround our downtown. What do we want this district to look like in the future? What mix of single-family homes, multifamily homes, apartment buildings, commercial properties would we like to see? And without a clear strategic vision, without agreeing on a direction we would like to go, it's going to be very difficult to create a relevant zoning regulation. But it's also important, going back to number one, I'm getting there. It's also important that the citizen proposed central residential district receives a fair hearing by city council. Members may not agree with every provision in that proposal, but it should serve to inform council and facilitate discussion. So that's all I have.
All right, any other discussion on number one? Okay, we'll move on to number two, adding language to the code addressing bed and breakfast and short-term rentals and amending the definition of bed and breakfast inn. Does anyone want to add any background to that? Seems pretty self-explanatory. This is another issue where citizens have called to our attention a lack of
Specificity.
thank you, specificity with regard to this issue. I have over the years, more recently, come to be familiar with this idea of short-term rental. And I think that it's important that we address it sooner rather than later before it becomes a problem that we need to fix. So that's all I have to say on that one.
Mr. President,
Yep, go ahead.
I also agree that this is an issue that was
Talk,
recently.
talk into your
I
microphone.
agree that this is an issue that was it's an important issue that was recently brought to us by a constituent. I think we have recently received legal advice that our rental policy, our rental registration policy does cover short-term rentals. So it's important to note that we do have some control over the short-term rentals, or at least the ability to understand where they are. I think that we should continue inspecting whether we have enough regulations around rentals, but I don't believe it belongs in zoning. I believe it should be with our rental regulation policies. Thanks.
Keep going.
Attack the microphone.
Mick Jagger on, yeah.
I'm not going to take requests, so. This is an issue. I've already had a call from a constituent where there is a property that was, its historic use has been residential, and it's on a residential street, and it has been bought and is being used as a short-term rental for many people. And it's disrupted the street. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to address it somehow, be it zoning and or inspection. But it's certainly a topic worthy of further discussion, because it's not a, gee, this might happen. It's happening now. And so we have to rise to the occasion and take care of it in an appropriate manner.
Anyone else want to add anything to this one? Go ahead.
To Joel's point, we do already regulate short-term rentals because we regulate rentals. I guess I have a question. Is it the intent to bring our rental We already regulate short-term rentals because we regulate rentals. So is it the intent to bring our rental ordinance into this discussion and re-examine that document in order to have consistency between these two regulations?
No, I think it's a separate discussion. I think this discussion does not belong in the zoning discussion.
So I guess my question though is if everybody else disagrees and we are in fact going to discuss it, and I frankly think probably we should to see if there are any gaps in our code, which is not to say that there are. I don't know that we can do that without also looking at the regulations we have on the books, and we're gonna have to tweak those as well, so I think we should have the discussion. I don't know that we need to have it in this context, but we should probably have it right now while we've all got the code in front of us.
Yeah, well, I mean, it may or may not be that this is something that can be taken care of prior to implementing the new zoning code. So, I mean, I don't know what this would consist of. I do know that I don't want to slow things down for any one purpose if it's something that we can address at a later date, so. But yeah, it's definitely, I think, something that we need to look into. Anybody else? Okay. Number 3. Number 3 says add dog parks as a conditional use in the zones of R1, R2, R3, commercial, RC, PR, and UR. So Jeff, you're the expert. Make sure you get right in that microphone.
Oh, give me a second to
Microphone is your friend.
talk into the microphone.
Oh, that's
I
true.
want to be on the record. Okay, so right now at another recent meeting, we added dog parks as a defined term. It is conditional and recreation conservation, which I believe would limit it to current parkland, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think it might benefit us to have more options, particularly if it is made a conditional use and it's got those 6 or 7 enumerated factors that the planning director would need to consider and give her the ability or the responsibility really to establish additional regulations so that it does not disrupt the surrounding neighborhood. So I guess the main thrust of number 3 here is that I think we should have more flexibility where these are located.
Anyone else want to add anything to number 3?
Since we're coming up with a list to consider, I would concur with Jeff that this is something that we should discuss as part of our zoning code update.
Well, and naturally, this is not a comprehensive list. It's not like these are the only things we're going to be talking about. I'm sure there are a lot of much smaller things that will just come up in the natural course of our discussion. The main purpose for creating this list was just to get some feedback from members of council about large issues or larger issues that they were considering. Number 4, amend the factors considered when granting a conditional use. Page 100 to omit item F. Yeah, what's our problem with F?
Yeah, so I'm sure everybody tuned in. The Planning Commission spent a good deal of time discussing the factors that would be considered by the planning director in order to grant a conditional use. There was a lot of discussion on the specific language, and what we landed on was the proposed use promotes the quality of life of its users and its neighbors. Now, to me, that seems very subjective on several levels, right? What does it mean to promote quality of life? Whose quality of life? It seems if we're already addressing adequate ingress and egress, not likely to pose a greater threat to public safety or health than all other uses, listed as permitted, not likely to overburden government services such as police, fire, sewer, water, and other infrastructure, not likely to cause a greater negative impact on the environmental quality than all other uses listed as permitted by right for that zone or district, does not conflict with objectives set forth in the most current adopted comprehensive plan. Now, those A through E seem to really cover quality of life of users and neighbors. So I guess I've got two issues, one, the language specifically, but then also the promotes language. I don't think when we are creating land use regulations, telling people what they cannot do with their property, it should be based on whether it promotes quality of life versus not detracting from quality of life of the surrounding area. I would
Okay,
take either of those, strike it all together or adjust the language so that it needs at negative.
okay, thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on number 4? All right, that will bring us to number 5. Recommendation to review and possibly amend the city's proposed future land use map.
Yes, Mr. President, I'll comment on that. I do think we have an opportunity here to deconflict a couple of competing documents. Still not close enough. I think we've got an opportunity here to deconflict two conflicting documents. The proposed land use map, which has been in existence for a bit and that we amended last year based on that Dunbridge Road project, indicates that the land north up at the intersection of Brim and Newton to be residential. And, I think I'm in favor of the proposed land use map, but unfortunately, we've also got a current zoning map that indicates a parcel that's under a request for rezoning right now as being industrial, as well as some surrounding property. I just suggest that before we move forward with a zoning map in a new zoning code, which will be approved sometime in the next few months, that is in direct conflict in certain portions with our future land use map, that we deconflict one or the other. I'm in favor of changing the zoning map to align with the future land use map, but one way or the other, I think we need to agree on one way forward. And that's why I put it on the agenda.
I don't disagree with the idea of having them in sync, but concerning that specific property, there is a request to rezone it. It was brought forward to the Planning Commission at the March meeting, and then they did what they usually do, what they're supposed to do, and they set it for a public hearing for the next Planning Commission meeting. And so I would not want to do anything with that property prior to the public hearing, and possibly prior to if it eventually comes before council. But to act on it before the public hearing would, I think, would send the wrong message. We want to give people the opportunity to weigh in on whether it should be residential or industrial. So I don't, like I said, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just, for that property, I don't want anything touched until it's gone through the process and we have a better idea of how it should ultimately be zoned.
Any other thoughts on number 5? Okay. That brings us to number 6. Number 6, proposing changes to the use table for the pedestrian residential district.
Mr. President? So my proposal, I'm going to speak in the first person, but the proposal and documents in the packet this evening were developed by Jeff and me with input from Planning Director Heather Saylor, the mayor, Lori Trutter, and ZoneCo. The proposal, so it's 6 and 7 in the packet, but our proposal has 2 parts. One, a series of changes to the PR district that are in response to citizen concerns about expanding commercial uses in our neighborhoods surrounding downtown. The second is a suggestion that we create a new mixed use zone in some or all of the existing spots of proposed commercial that are dotted throughout the proposed PR district already. So I think this proposal is a good way forward for several reasons. It represents a more incremental approach. It acknowledges the concerns that we've heard from residents in these neighborhoods in our community by removing nearly all the commercial uses from the PR district altogether and allowing others only conditionally. And it provides an important mixed use tool for the city, as called for by our planning documents, that can be further studied and, if warranted, applied elsewhere in the future. So, in tonight's packet, there are several documents on our proposal. The first is a document proposing changes to the use table for the revised pedestrian residential district. So, if you take a look at that, I propose removing several uses altogether from this table, including corner store, bar, tavern, microbrewery and distillery, and retail sales. I believe these commercial uses represent the most intense commercial uses proposed for the district. And those commercial uses found most objectionable by many of the concerned citizens I have spoken with. Under the revised pedestrian residential district, I would also move those several uses circled at the bottom: the barber beauty spa, campus ministry, daycare center, and funeral home from the permitted by right column to the conditional column. The draft code requires the planning director to review any conditional use application. There are a number of factors in the code that the director must review, as well as examples of specific conditions that the planning director may impose where conditional uses are concerned, including setbacks, buffers, hours of operation, noise transmission, height limits, and parking provisions. So while this proposal does not go as far as the citizen proposed central residential district in restricting uses, it is very much a response to the concerns we've heard from the community and a way forward that I can support. Before I ask if there's any questions from you guys, Jeff, did I miss anything?
I guess the only thing I would add is that this is a living, breathing document that we are going to continue to monitor, revise for the next 20, 30, if our current code's any indication, 50 years. So I guess I just want to stress that this is a starting point, and issues will undoubtedly arise, probably that are not on anybody's radar right now. And if or when they do, we do have the ability to adjust this as needed to address those.
Mr. President,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have just a few questions. I'll direct them to Ms. Phipps. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
So what was the decision for the professional offices in the permitted by right?
Yeah. So home, you know that home occupations are permitted citywide in any dwelling use. It's a permitted accessory use. If you want the code section, I'd have to look for it, right? But professional offices and then retail services, to me, are just a difference in degree. So I didn't find those as intensive uses as the ones that I'm proposing to remove. What are your thoughts there? Do you think, and also they exist, we have examples of professional offices being good neighbors right now, and I'm inclined to think most can be going forward. What are your thoughts there?
No, I understand that thought process, and I was just kind of asking so it would be, so everyone else would kind of hear what was going on in there as to why that one. It just seemed like it was one of the ones that everything else was conditional. That one was still as a permitted. So I just kind of wanted to hear your thought process on that.
Jeff, do you have anything to add? I want to take all the questions.
Oh,
No?
you go
Okay.
right
All
ahead.
right.
You're doing a great job.
My second question would be as to, I think we've heard some expressed concerns over 2-unit dwellings. That is also still as a permitted by right. I would love to hear the thought process behind that as to why that is still a permitted use.
Yeah. So our planning documents call for a broader spectrum of housing options in the neighborhoods that are surround downtown, but also citywide, right? And so all 5 residential zones and districts do have in the current draft more diverse housing options, right? And so this is what is proposed. I guess the 2-unit dwelling and ADUs are what are being proposed for this specific district. But so on the one hand, our planning documents call for this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, I totally uh, recognize that we've heard many comments about folks that feel that their neighborhoods are already overburdened by rentals, and then specifically that the exterior of rental properties are something that they've yeah that give them some heartache. So I mean, I see both sides of that. I'm happy to keep thinking about this. I was really interested in kind of seeing where colleagues on council were on this specific issue. So that's why I was inclined to keep it in for now.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
I'll jump in and add one more thing there if I could. Nobody's talking about banning rental units. There's nothing we are going to be able to do to ban rental units. What we're talking about doing is banning smaller rental units. A major concern that I have with any of these proposals, and I think it's on everybody's radar, is the number of legal non-conforming properties we're going to be creating the tighter we make these regulations. What that's going to mean for a property owner, according to many that I've talked to, is that they're going to have trouble finding insurance. If their property gets destroyed, they're going to have trouble rebuilding. They're going to need to apply for a zoning certificate from the planning director within 3 years. So as I am out here having these conversations, what I hear a lot about is the need for code enforcement, exterior housing standards, architectural design standards, implementing all of this over the next few years. What it sounds like we're talking about when we talk about really tightening these regulations as much as possible is taking a whole lot of planning department resources. Granted, we funded 1 additional staff member in that department with the recent budget we passed. We're going to need some more staff if we're talking about making the entire east side of Bowling Green a legal non-conforming use. And it's going to raise costs on a lot of people.
So what I'm hearing you're saying, Jeff, is that there's already a lot of 2-unit, multi-unit dwellings in the current PR district. And those, while they would be legal non-conforming buildings, they would then have to apply for a zoning certificate, which would then go to the planning director, which would pull resources away from our stated goal of really trying to go after rental properties that we are looking at as, not holding up the standards of the neighborhood. So instead of focusing on rental properties that are really being blights on the neighborhood, we would instead have to focus our resources on going out, trying to find all of the legal non-conforming buildings if we are cutting out 2-unit dwellings in the PR district. Is that correct?
I am reluctant to overstep my bounds. I'm not the one that will be administering this. What I have heard from the city attorney is that this will create a huge number of legal non-conforming uses. What I am reading in the code and what I have heard from other administrative professionals who will be tasked with implementing this is that paperwork, and for a good example of this, look at what's going on with our rental registration ordinance right now. And we, in effect, would be asking all of those property owners to then come back, plus the homeowners, by the way. We've heard from a lot of people who have shared driveways, whose homes aren't meeting setback requirements. They're all going to be captured in this net, and I shouldn't say all. We're going to be capturing a lot of people in this net, and that's going to create a lot of administrative work, it appears to me.
Thank you.
So that is, yes, something that I have a lot of concerns about on any of this.
Okay. Well, we seem to have gotten a little far afield on the chart here, but
Well, no, I'll move on.
no, does anyone else have anything they want to contribute at this point on what's been discussed before Rachel moves on with some more details? All right.
Okay, so number 7, sorry, no page numbers, is a proposal for a new zone. And then following that are 2 maps proposing possible locations where it might be implemented. These maps are a copy of part of the most recent draft zoning map. If you have a color version, the downtown is light blue. The proposed PR district is the tan donut around downtown, and the spots of light pink circled in red are proposed commercial. So right now, under our current zoning code, those light pink blocks circled in red are a mix of mostly B2 general commercial or M1 light industrial or some other level of commercial or industrial zoning. And they are being, used as such. Zone Co proposed to zone all of these spots commercial in the new zoning code, the same commercial as Kroger and Walmart on the north and south ends of town. So I am not proposing to change the boundaries of any of these spots. I'm only proposing to create a new zone that treats some or all of these spots differently than the Kroger and Walmart commercial zoning. There's also a table in the packet. So the next page, comparing the new zone's proposed lot standards and uses to those in M1 light industrial, existing B2 general commercial, and proposed commercials. So the first 2 columns represent the zoning in these spots today. And if you take a look, there are several uses in M1 light industrial and B2 general commercial that I bet we can all agree are inappropriate in a neighborhood setting. The third column is how these spots are zoned in the most recent draft of the zoning code. So that heading is proposed commercial. And the fourth column is the proposal for the new zone. So we worked backwards from the proposed commercial zone to build this proposal for the new zone. And I'll highlight the big differences between proposed commercial and the new zone. On page 1 of the table, where proposed commercial would allow many auto-oriented uses by right, the new zone would not. Proposed commercial also allows retail centers, which are defined as commercial establishments located in a single structure of a minimum size of 100,000 square feet. The new zone would get rid of that use altogether. In proposed commercial, bars and taverns and microbreweries and microdistilleries are permitted by right. The new zone would make these uses conditional, requiring planning director approval again. Again, there are a number of factors enumerated in the draft code, as well as examples of specific conditions that the planning director may impose on conditional uses, including those setbacks, buffers, hours of operation, noise transmission, height limits, and parking provisions. So proposed commercial does not allow any residential uses, and I would propose permitting 1, 2, and 3 unit dwellings in the new zone. I also would suggest that we create architectural design standards for the new zone to help ensure that any new development or substantial redevelopment will add value to the surrounding neighborhood without detracting from the area aesthetically. So I think that this new zone might be a better fit for these existing spots that are smack in the middle of our neighborhoods. The uses permitted take into consideration the current zoning here and expectations of owners in these areas, but are more appropriate to a neighborhood setting. One of the goals of our zoning code update process is to make our code more forward looking and to align it with our planning documents. I think adding residential uses to the new zone can make the transition between these primarily commercial blocks and primarily residential blocks more pleasant and seamless over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, this new zoning code is going to be with us for a while. I also believe the residential piece adds some flexibility for owners. I can imagine some existing structures in the area being reused for commercial and residential purposes. Before I ask if there are any questions again, Jeff, do you want to add anything?
I would just really underscore the importance of looking at those first 2 columns, M1 and B2. Most people I've talked to are not aware of the fact that today in the city of Bowling Green, you could build an airport or a landing field off of North Maple. South Maple, sorry. So one way or another, I think we do need to address these areas clearly. I don't think anybody would dispute that, whether it's this plan or another. I'm happy to see us taking a look at these areas.
Does anyone have any questions about new zone that we can address?
I would just like to say that I support, I support looking at this. This looks like it makes a lot of sense to me. We are limiting what are effectively unlimited commercial uses and making sure that these remain beneficial neighbors, I guess would be the best way to put it. So when I look at these proposed new uses, these are already things that exist in the neighborhoods and probably things that will benefit the area.
Is there anyone that feels, at the moment anyway, outright opposed to this notion? Okay, it's going to take a while for, us to digest this, but thank you for bringing this forward and putting it on our radar. Although it prevents me from building an airstrip, which has always been a dream of mine, so. Okay. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add? Or anyone else have any comments on any of these things? Okay. That takes us through our list. Our next meeting, which will be on Thursday, March 23rd here, same bat time, same bat channel, will be the public forum. And the format of that will be different. It'll be a lot more interactive, where members of the audience will be participating in the process. And also there will be the ability to present ideas, but also ask questions and have discussion on various items. That's all I've got unless someone has something they want to add. All right, we're done for tonight. Thank you very much for coming.